school coaches can't do, you know,
Um,
they have to adapt now. Sami Jo, your hand's up. Go ahead.
So because Billy's on the ice, I'm allowed to ask these questions now because he can't hear me. So thank you, Ken, for being on the call. I think this is great for these people, for all of us to hear, but just to get a different perspective is really great. So thank you for taking the time. But I think what would really help this group, only because I obviously know sledge hockey and have been around the guys for so long, and so I have seen everything you talk about, I have seen you do it with the guys. So from their perspective, you know, I hear the other side.
yeah.
And so specifically, I want you to talk, or I want to hear more about when you first came into the team. And I think this is important for every coach because I think you deal with what are visually, we can see the impairments. But I think on every team, players have different perspective, different maybe mental health issues, those kind of things that we maybe don't see as coaches. So you came into a team where that team in the dressing room was their safe space. And it was the only place they felt normal, right? As people with disabilities, you play sports often because it normalizes it. You get to be around guys that have gone through a cancer treatment, or, you know, you have gone through the same things. And I think specifically Tom Malloy talked about, he just lost another goalie because she flunked out of school. And so the things that we as coaches don't see, that maybe you didn't get to see, coming into the team and going through the storming phase that you went through with the guys, there was a lot of pushback. And I saw that. I thought from my perspective, it was great because these guys had never gone through what the national women's team had gone through, what I saw. They had never trained that hard, never had those high expectations because of their disabilities, I think. And they had never placed those upon themselves either. So I guess my broader question for these guys is how do you get that across to people that sometimes you do have to be the bad guy. Sometimes you have to go through that. So in the end, they have that respect for you in the end. It's sometimes a long-term thing. I now know that you would be on the top of our Christmas list, but that might not have been the case 8 years ago. So that transition from there, and how you as a coach deal with that, because you know what you are asking, you know that you're getting pushback, and you know that sometimes it is really hard. And, you know, I think specifically of Tom, you know, one of his players that had to go back to fight for custody for one of her child that, you know, he didn't know about, you know. So how do you get that relationship but still maintain that distance enough to be able to be that person? So that's my first question. So start there, and then I'll probably have 1,000 more.
Well, that's a great question. Let me think about it for a second. Well, you know what? As I mentioned, so when I got this job, when I was asked to take this job, I said, okay, I'll take this job, you guys. And this is to Hockey Canada. I said, you know what? As long as we're going to have the same resources as everybody else, as long as we're going to be considered a full-time national program, and then I'll go in and I'll kick some ass, basically, right? I'll set a standard, and I'm willing to do that as long as I have the support of Hockey Canada. And Hockey Canada says, oh yeah, no problem. And they've always been very supportive. So for me, Sami Jo, it's all about when I do para hockey, or when I was coaching at SAIT, or wherever I was coaching. To me, it's about high performance. I'm not here for rec hockey. Rec hockey I'll do with my grandchildren or on the side, but you know, that's true. But this, to me, it has to be business. And so, as you mentioned, I had to learn how to have a standard, a high standard, and you have to get to know the players. And it took a while to develop some relationships, and now I think I have pretty strong relationships, especially with some of the guys from the first quad. And I like to think that, and I hope it's true. But you know, I think leadership isn't easy, and it's not a popularity contest, and unfortunately that's the reality of it. And I think a leader that is fair and firm, but has a standard that's for everybody, and holds guys accountable to that standard, and doesn't demean them individually in front of the group or things like that. That's a guy you can respect, or a lady you can respect. And I've tried to be that kind of fair but firm, but have a high standard. I've tried to do that, and yeah, it's all my whole career. I'm sure there's guys at SAIT that still curse me to this day, and that was just my standard, you know. I mean, and the standard was based on how I thought we needed to play to be successful, and how they needed to do things to be successful in their lives, etc. And so that's how I took that approach. And like I said, maybe I would have, now looking back, I would have adjusted a little bit, but I still would have had the same standard. Maybe my approach would have been a little bit differenter, and maybe get them to maybe the key veterans, get them understand what I was trying to do and build it from that way a little bit more. But overall, I did what I did at that time, and I did my best, and we were almost there. And then we started this quad with a whole new team, and I think the guys are liking the environment we have now. And but you know what? And the same thing I did at SAIT. I mean, SAIT wasn't successful either, and it took me about 5 years to get that program turned around, and you had to bring guys in. If they didn't suit your standard, you had to release them and get new guys, and just keep doing it till you found the right mix. And
I think it's very similar to Wally coming into the national women's team program when he came in, because we, most of us at that time had played and got there because of talent and not because of any type of training, or just it happened that we played at a certain level. And that trajectory going from, wow, this is amazing, and I think a lot of people came into women's hockey thinking, wow, these girls can play, to expecting professionalism. And that, is a transition. Most people come into a disabled sport thinking, wow, this is amazing. These guys are incredible. They're inspirations. And you got to quickly get over that, right? And just treat them as professionals. And that's not necessarily an easy transition. And in women's hockey, we don't see that as much anymore. But maybe Wally can comment on that, because in the mid 90s, that was the case. We often had coaches coming in and treated us with kid gloves, because that was, wow, so good for you that you're playing, and getting over that mentality. And I think Wally really inspired a lot of the coaches of the day, especially male coaches coming in, to be able to do that. Wally, you're on mute.
I don't know what to say. For me, being invited to take over the Oval female team was similar to Ken taking over the sledge hockey team. Dealing with women in hockey, women in sport. And the thing that impressed me, Ken, similar to you, was there's something special about the women athlete, and I think the sledge hockey athlete. They've had to struggle more than ever to earn respect. And there's a sense of dignity. And I wouldn't, coach men's sports now, because the women want answers. They have questions. They want to know. Men have been coached traditionally, being yelled at and told and directed, my way, highway. And I think the women are going to help take the game to another level in terms of earning respect for the athlete. And trust comes from respect. And you seem to have been able to create that, because there's not many coaches that can last as long as you did at SAIT, can last as long as anybody does with a team in the NHL and maintain their livelihood. And I think the bottom line of trust, respect, and the relationships is so different. I thought the females were starved to be treated with respect and treated as professionals. And I know I wasn't good enough to coach them, because I had been a teller and a yeller. and I started to listen more and appreciate more. But I had to draw lines in the sand with some players, but that was challenging. But the whole chemistry of coaching is what it's all about. It's an art, whether it's your sport, whether it's female hockey, any league. Every group is different, and I think we've got a lot to learn from the females in sport in terms of what they're capable of bringing. And that's really all I can say. And I've got an awful lot of respect for that. So, Ken, if you can mention anything on what's been said so far.
I agree with what you said and what Sami Jo said. I guess I remember when Sami Jo, when I first to answer a little bit more of your question, when I first came on board with this program, I thought, I wasn't special ed before. I was a special ed teacher for 9 years in Calgary. But anyways, and I had a sense of some of that stuff that these guys were going through. But then I saw them on the ice, and I thought, do I treat them different, or do I treat them like my players at state? And I remember asking, I forget who it was, one of the veterans, and they said, just treat us as you would your team. So I did. From that day on, I treat them just like I would any team I've ever coached, and I still do to this day. The approach has changed, but like I said, they want that. They want, like you said, Sami Jo, they were coddled. They were saying, oh, that's okay. You don't have to work hard. Don't have to back check. It's okay. Da 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 da. No, if you want to win, you're going to have to do these things, guys. And so that was part of the evolution of me and evolution of the team in general to where we are today. So, we've got a good thing going now, and I really hope the Paralympics happen. I'm getting worried here every day now when I hear all this COVID stuff going on. So that's another issue. But yeah, so that was a good question, Sami Jo. And I think, and you got to have some heart-to-heart discussions too. I've had a few heart-to-heart discussions with guys from the first quad during that time, and then now with them again. The younger guys now, they don't know anything different, right? It's more, and so they're seeing the veteran players training so hard, doing all they do off the ice and on the ice, away from our camps, because we're 90% of the time we're away from each other. So this accountability piece is huge. So I think the future, because of what the old guys have got it now, and they've teach the young guys, because we're going to address, we're bringing 17 players to the Paralympics. We're going to address probably half our roster will be new players that weren't there in 2018. So that's why I feel so proud about the program, because the veteran players have said, okay, they're working out, they're doing all this. The young guys see that. And that's again, going back to whether it's a video, whether it's how to shoot a puck, how to back check. If the players see the other guys doing it, especially the lead dogs, it's just, that's it. You don't have to do much more as a coach, right? They get it.
Ken, what you said, I thought of the example. They talk about the great NHL players and the quality of their practice and their work ethic and what they do off the ice. And, Giordano has a reputation for elevating his fitness scores every year. And Crosby is one of the best practice players in the world. And any elite team reaches that level of performance with some of its best players, and they do take the team with them under their wing. And I think coaches could capitalize on that a lot more, take advantage of that a lot more, relative to even the thinking of the game and how the game can be played. So I think there's so much to be done in sport. I just hope it can continue. That's all.
Well, just a comment on that. For me, I played football, played rugby, played hockey. I'm talking team sports here. And you know what? For me, hockey is the most player-based sport there is. because once the puck drops, coaches have very little control of what's happening. You got football, you got stoppages in play, you got all these timeouts, you got all kinds of things. Send in plays, send this in. Basketball, you're subbing in, subbing out all the time. Hockey's the only real sport that the players truly do decide the fate of the game. They decide what's happening out there. And to your point about read and react, that's another key thing that we had to do with our players is like I mentioned, we had so many players that didn't know hockey. Okay, if the puck goes here, what do I do? If this doesn't work, what do I do? Just reading the game situations. And that's why, Peter, going back to your point about practice, we're doing so much small area game stuff, crowded space stuff. So they got to make decisions. Everything isn't like that's drawn out on the board, a breakout. Things don't happen 9 out of 10 times that way. So, yeah, for me, the players dictate your success. And so you better have your lead dogs on your side or else you won't do well.
Sami, any other questions?
Well, if you can get anything out of Billy to maybe take the garbage out or anything like that, you just let me know. Because if you have figured it out, then
well, you know what we'll do? We'll tie it to his time.
Sami, I'm going to leave that in.
We'll tie it to. Hey, how about this? We'll tie it to his time on the ice on the power play.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I see. You know what's interesting about somebody like Billy, and you have such diverse backgrounds on your team,
right,
which is so incredible, from the way they were raised in their family to issues of mental health to overcoming these huge things. But yeah, it's incredible the diversity that you would have to deal with as a coaching staff. And I think that they all seem to respond in different ways too. So, but when I see Billy out there, we were just in Winnipeg for the holidays, and I see him on the ice, 5-6 hours playing shinny on an outdoor rink, and just the sheer love of the game.
Yeah.
And that has not gone away through how many years? 20 years on the national team, or 25, 30. I don't even know how long he's been on the national team. 30 years now, I guess, right? Something like that.
Probably 20 for sure.
Yeah, so crazy. And to be able to harness that, to be able to still have that as an athlete is something that I think is absolutely incredible. And I think that within the national team programs, within the women's programs, Peter and Wally and Tim having gone through that, sometimes that's beaten out of us in those quads. And a lot of my peers never played the game after they were released from the national team. They never just went out and played shinny. They don't play women's rec hockey. They don't, they aren't involved really until their kids are involved and they start coaching, and then they get into it in a different way.
Yeah.
But maintaining that joy and that sheer just excitement to be on the ice, I think, is something so key. So I think that is the key for your team to be able to just maintain that, because I don't necessarily see that with the American teams and with other teams. It's just that joy of play. And that's hard in an Olympic cycle to maintain that, because there's so many other pressures, and I get that. But I commend you on how that's going so far, because I saw it in Winnipeg, and I could see him out there just playing with all the other stand-up players and just loving being out there. So I love that that's still in him. And while I had to wake him up to get him to go to practice today, I know that as soon as he steps on the ice, he loves it every single time. So credit to the program and to you having stepped into that role as well.
Well, thanks, but that's all on Billy. Billy, that's when I first ever met Billy. I said, this guy loves playing hockey, so that's my card on him. That's the card I can play with him. Is he loves playing the game, and he loves being on the ice. And for me, like I was mentioning, Sami Jo and everybody, for me, you can have all the tactics. That's important, fitness and all this. And I agree with you, Sami. The key thing is spirit. Never kill the spirit. And I think Father Bauer said this, let spirit prevail. I remember in his book, he said something, let spirit prevail. And that's about XOs and all this other junk, not junk, but, let them have that's in their heart playing the game. And that's why, Peter, back to your point, we always have competitions and practices every time we practice something, because that's the fun part. That's the fun part, right?
And sorry for being in and out a bit, but as you're talking there, I think truer words never spoken, Sami, about the passion. Obviously, great credit to Billy and all those players. But I think Ken deserves a bit of credit. Maybe some coaches in the past deserve some credit for, in Ken's example, changing his approach and adapting to the players and making it more player driven. The fun and the enjoyment fuels that passion and allows that passion to burn for a longer period of time. So, hats off to Ken. Hats off to some of the past coaches, and a really terrific lesson for all the coaches who might listen in here. Look for the positives, be positive. That's not to say never correct or never sit down and go through errors, but actively look for the positive. And again, to borrow Wally's, transmit belief. Like, it's the biggest thing that fuels that passion. Go ahead, Peter.
I think, Ken, you talked about all this working in educational institutions, and, the beauty of them getting a great education, developing certainly not only as hockey players, but as people. And that's what really brings, the satisfaction to coaching at this level, and certainly the development at any level. And one of the things I've always appreciated as well with the players, or thought of with the players after they graduate, it's interesting to see if they keep on playing. And, to Sami's point, that, they still love the game when they're done, playing at whatever level they sort of have gravitated to. So I think that, that's another part of it. When they keep playing, when they tell me that they're playing in a rec league or a beer league or, whatever it is, that's a satisfying part of it as well.
Yeah, great point.
Sami, you're still playing, eh?
I do. I still play on 3 rec teams. Just had a hip replacement, but only took about 2 weeks off, and I'm terrible as a forward and defenseman. But
right,
okay.
But you'll never catch Lester in games played.
Yeah.
I will never. That was somebody. Leslie
Sami,
Red.
we're all terrible, Sami. We're all terrible.
We're all terrible. That's when you know you really
say
love it. If you still go back when you are terrible, then you really love it.